Hi guys, welcome back to Origami Twist. Today is daily December day 10 and we are going to make a beaded bracelet. They're fairly straightforward to make, but the threading technique is a little bit different than you might see normally. And I'm also going to give you a special tutorial on how to get and measurements on how to get the beads uniform so that they're all the same size. Okay, definitely feel free to subscribe as well as like the video and comment below. I love seeing your comments. The list of ingredients is below. It's a fairly long one this time, but nothing that you don't have at home already. Most of the stuff is easily available. And when you've gathered all of your ingredients, come back for the tutorial. In order to make one bracelet, I used 4 inches by 12 inches, 2 of those sheets. So 2/3 of a 12 by 12 piece of scrapbooking paper. And I did have 5 beads left over. Now I did promise in the introduction that I was going to show you how to measure out the paper perfectly so that you could have even uniform beads, which is absolutely key for the design that I've done here. They all need to be exactly the same length. So you're going to do that by turning your paper over to the white plain side, or if you have double-sided paper, go to the side that you are not making the beads out of. You're then going to start at the 0 position for your ruler, and you're going to make a mark at 3/4 of an inch. You're then going to measure 1/4 of an inch over, so at the 1 inch mark, make another mark. This is going to be the end piece for your bead. You're then going to make a mark at 1 3/4 inches, and again at 2 inches. So you're probably noticing a pattern here: 3/4 of an inch, 1/4 inch, 3/4 of an inch, 1/4 inch. You're going to follow that same pattern, so 2 3/4 inches, and then at 3 inches, 3 3/4 inches, and then at 4 inches, etc., all the way down the length of your paper. When you finish marking off the paper, turn the paper around, and here is where we need to be very, very, very careful about how we're going to do this. If you're using a 12-inch sheet of paper and you've just turned your paper around, at the top you should have a mark at the 1/4 inch and a mark at the 1 inch. Can you see that? So if I were to look at a ruler, it's marked at 1/4 inch and it's marked at 1 inch. If that is the case, then you come down to the bottom and you measure in 1/2 of an inch and then mark again at 3/4 of an inch. And I'll show you what that does. When you line up the 2 points and draw a, oops, make sure it's that first point. When you line up the first 2 points and connect between them, and line up the second 2 points and connect between them, you'll see a shape that again is like a little bit of a flat triangle. That's what you want. All right, so let's mark off the rest of the paper. So the first mark was at 1/2 inch, the second one is at 3/4 of an inch. The third one is going to be 3/4 of an inch over, so again 1 1/2 inches. Then you're going to mark at 1 3/4 inches. So the next one is 3/4 of an inch over, which is at 2 1/2 inches. And then again at 2 3/4 inches. So again, it's that same pattern, it's just offset by 1/2 an inch. So you've made that 1/2 an inch in, then you've done 1/4 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, and you guessed it, the next one is 3/4 of an inch along, which makes it at 3 1/2 inches. So 1/4, 3/4, 1/4, 3/4, and so on. Okay, now let's connect those dots. I like to put my pencil at the first one and then pivot around it so that I don't accidentally connect the wrong dots. I did find myself doing that before. So we're going to slide over to the next dot or mark and connect them in a straight line. Put your pencil on the next dot, slide to the next one, and so on, making a kind of an interesting zigzaggy pattern here. And you just go all the way across and meet me back here. Okay, that's what the finished one looks like. If you've got a home copier or you want to bring this into your office supply store, you could photocopy this onto any of your patterned paper and you wouldn't have to do it up. It's like a template. So that's something to keep in mind. You could even do up a template on an A4 or an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper and do 2 4-inch widths so that you can just send it again through the copier. If you don't have one of those, that's okay. Just mark out both sheets of paper and then we'll get to the next step. Okay, notice that I've made a few mistakes here. If it's not looking right to you for some reason, you can double check all of your numbers in the description box. I'll put all of the measurements, exactly which points along your ruler for a 12-inch length of paper that you should be marking the points, okay? And you can do any up to that 12 inches. Double checked in the description. Okay, now let's chop up the bead papers. All you have to do is either take a pair of scissors or your cutter, line the line up in the groove for the cutter, or again, chop it with a pair of scissors. And there you go, 1 bead paper. Just keep doing that for both pieces of paper and come back here. Okay, here we go, tons and tons of bead papers. This is the most straightforward part of the entire project. You just need a dollop of glue. So you just dab a tiny bit of glue on there and then wipe off the excess. You really only want a little bit of glue on the very end of your bead. And the process is quite simple. You just start at the wide end and just neatly roll your bead along the edge, making sure that it's nice and even as you go. There are no gaps and it's nice and smooth. And fairly tight, not too tight. You do want to have a hole big enough to be able to put your tapestry needle and thread through later. But that's it, 1 bead. So 1 down, whole stack of them to go. And meet me back here for the rest of the bracelet. Okay, now we've got a big stack of beads here, and I'm going to show you how to string them together to make your bracelet. First things first, pop down a piece of blu-tack, work it a little bit so it's nice and sticky, and pop it down on your work surface, making sure it's not a surface that's going to stain, that the blu-tack is going to stain. And then you need the thread that you're choosing to use. Again, I'm using a metallic embroidery thread. You can use whatever you've got handy. You don't want it to be too stretchy or too stiff. Somewhere in between is very helpful. All right, I'm going to place the first bead on my blu-tack. This will help it to, and not push in very hard, just enough to stick it. This will help to anchor your bead and will give you something to work, a surface to work on as you're adding beads. I'm going to thread the first tapestry needle onto my working thread, and then I'm going to thread that needle through the center of the bead and pull on the thread until it's halfway. You have an equal amount on either side. And then thread the other side, thread the needle, put the thread through the second needle on the other side. So now I've got 1 needle on each side. Now we're going to add a bead. So you just put the needle on the right hand side through the bead, so it's now on the left hand side, and take the needle on the left hand side and thread it through so that it's now on the right hand side, and pull. Making sure, especially with this first one, that the two lengths are pretty equal, because you're going to get to the end of your bead and go, oh no, I've run out of thread, which you can always tie on more, but it's helpful to have it as even as possible to start with. Alright, once you're happy with that, you're just going to add the next bead. So once again, on the right hand side, go over to the left hand side, and the one on the left hand side goes through and over to the right hand side, and tighten the bead. I'm not pulling too tight on this bead or on the thread because I don't want to split the bead. I'm just pulling tight enough to make it snug and not have any gaps. You want it nice and neat. And so on. Now as your string of beads becomes longer, you'll find that it's harder to work with. All you have to do is take that first one off of the blu-tack and stick the one that you just recently worked with onto the blu-tack, and that will anchor it in place while you add more beads. Just do that each time you need to as you go along. Okay, keeping in mind that for a small woman's hand, if you've used the measurements that I gave you in the description box below to make the beads, you'll have 5 beads left, and you can add on as many as you need to make larger bracelets if necessary, but this will give you a small woman's size bracelet. And that's the last one. Okay, how do you finish it off? Well, that's quite easy. You're just going to put the first bead that you put on the blu-tack to hold it down, and just take your needles and thread the right one through to the right and the left one through to the left, just like you have with every other bead on the list, on the group. Oops, making sure that stays stuck to the blu-tack. And pull until it's comfortably taut, okay? Now, whichever one's a little bit longer, in this case my one on the left is a little bit longer, I'm going to thread that through the next one in the row so that now both threads are on one side. I'm going to tie in a double overhand knot. Again, doesn't have to be fancy, and if you can do it with the needle still on, that's actually great, because now that we've taken this off, rather than having to have not very nice ends, it makes sense to weave the ends in using your needle in and out of a few of these. I'd say 3 or 4, just to make sure that they're not going to come undone and make it look frayed and things. Okay, now trim off any ends, being sure not to cut through the working thread, obviously. Just cut real close but not through. There you go, one completed paper bracelet just in time for Christmas. Could even make several. How gorgeous is that? All right, I hope you enjoyed that, guys. Tune in tomorrow as I will be making a gift box, and I'll be teaching you how to create your own template for that. A gift box that's perfect to put one of these bracelets in. The gift box tomorrow will actually be perfect for rainbow loom bracelets as well, so definitely worth tuning in for, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Bye-bye.